If a hummingbird visits you when you're alone, someone is trying to reach you. It happened when you weren't expecting it. You were outside alone. Maybe you were having a hard day. Maybe you were thinking about someone you lost. Maybe you were just sitting quietly, not thinking about much at all. And then it appeared. A hummingbird hovering right in front of you, closer than it had any reason to be. You could hear the sound of its wing, possible blur of motion, and see its tiny eyes looking directly at you. It stayed longer than it should have. And when it left, something in you felt different. You didn't imagine it. You didn't make it up. And you are not alone in that moment, not by a long way. Welcome back to Backyard Bird Mind. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe because what you're about to learn will change the way you look at every bird that visits your yard. Today, we're going into one of the most profound and least understood experiences, the backyard bird world, the hummingbird that comes to you when you're alone. What it means across cultures and spiritual traditions that go back centuries. What science tells us about why hummingbirds behave this way, and why so many people just like you, have had this exact experience at the exact moment they needed it most. There are 7 things I want to share with you today. Stay until the end because the last one is the one that people tell me they think about for years. Before we talk about your yard, we need to go back because the belief that hummingbirds carry messages from the other side is not a modern invention. It is not a feel good social media trend. It is one of the oldest and most widespread spiritual beliefs in the entire Western Hemisphere, and it did not begin with any single culture. The Aztecs believed that warriors who died in battle were reincarnated as hummingbirds, depicted as a hummingbird warrior. The Aztecs did not choose this bird by accident. They chose it because the hummingbird embodied what they most valued in a spirit: speed, courage, impossible energy, and the ability to move between worlds. Across the Caribbean, particularly in Trinidad and among many Afro-Caribbean traditions, the hummingbird is known as a spirit messenger. The arrival of one near a grieving person is understood not as coincidence, but as contact. In many Native American traditions across North America, including those of the Pueblo peoples of the Southwest, the hummingbird is associated with healing, with love, and with the ability to travel great distances to bring comfort to the living. The Cherokee associated with joy and with the retrieval of things that have been lost. This is not fringe belief. This is ancient, multicultural, deeply rooted spiritual knowledge held by civilizations that observe the natural world with a depth of attention most of us have lost. Can you feel that a hummingbird is trying to tell you something? You are participating in one of the oldest human experiences on this continent. Now let's talk about what research tells us, because it doesn't contradict the spiritual, it deepens it. Hummingbirds have the largest brain-to-body ratio of any bird species on Earth, a full 24% more brain volume proportionally than songbirds. And a significant portion of that brain is dedicated to memory, particularly spatial and individual recognition memory. Research published in the journal Current Biology found that hummingbirds can remember every flower they visited, in what order, how recently, and how long it took to refill, tracking hundreds of locations simultaneously with extraordinary precision. But here's what matters for your yard. That same memory extends to people. Hummingbirds recognize individual humans. They track your clothing color, your routine, your movements. If you've been filling a feeder consistently, read frequently, the color they associate most strongly with nectar sources, a hummingbird in your territory will know you. Not your feeder, you. This is why a hummingbird that hovers in front of your face isn't confused or lost. It is investigating something it has already categorized as safe. It is coming to you because it has decided, based on its extraordinary cognitive capacity, that you specifically are someone worth approaching. That is not random. In the natural world, nothing a hummingbird does is random. Stay with me here because this is where the experiences of thousands of people begin to form a pattern that is impossible to dismiss. In a grief support communities, in church groups, in family Facebook pages across America, the same story appears over and over again. A woman loses her mother. She sits on the porch the next morning, not sure she can get through the day. A hummingbird appears and hovers at eye level for almost a minute, then is gone. A man stands at his father's grave for the first time after the funeral. A ruby-throated hummingbird appears from nowhere. It is October migration season. The bird is passing through, hovers for a moment directly in front of him, and then continues south. A grandmother sitting alone on her birthday, the first one since her husband died, looks up to find a hummingbird at the window of a room that has no feeder. These are not isolated stories. They are repeated across every state in this country, by people of different faiths, different backgrounds, different relationships with the supernatural. What is happening? The honest answer is that we don't fully know. What we do know is this: hummingbirds are drawn to stillness, to warmth, to emotional presence. They are among the few wild creatures that will actively approach a quiet, seated human. Not out of desperation, but out of what appears to be curiosity and confidence. If you are sitting alone, grieving, contemplating, or simply open, you are sending signals that a hummingbird can read. Your stillness, your warmth, your presence in a space you've made safe. Whether what arrives is a messenger or simply a creature responding to who you are in that moment, the effect is the same. You feel less alone. The ruby-throated hummingbird is the species most Americans encounter in the eastern half of the country, and its appearance is worth understanding, because nothing about it is accidental. The male ruby-throated hummingbird carries a throat patch called a gorget that shifts dramatically depending on the angle of light. In shadow, it appears black. In direct light, it blazes into a red so vivid and saturated it seems almost impossible for a living creature to produce by the physical arrangement of microscopic platelets in the feather barbules that reflect light. The same way a prism does. The bird doesn't change, the light changes and with the bird transforms. Ions, this quality, the ability to appear one way in darkness and another in light, is understood as the mark of a creature that exists between states, between the visible and the invisible, between what is present and what is past. The ruby throat has been associated in folk tradition with the blood bond between the living and the dead, the color that carries love across whatever distance separates them. You don't have to hold any particular belief to feel the weight of looking at a creature that's small, that improbable, hovering perfectly still 3 feet from your face, its throat suddenly blazing ruby in a shaft of afternoon light. It asks something of you, and most people in that moment understand exactly what it's asking. But what comes next is something most people find impossible to believe until it happens to them. A hummingbird in hover is doing something that no other North American bird can do. It is beating its wings at between 50 and 80 times per second, a rate that produces the distinctive hum that gives the bird its name. Its heart beats at over 1,200 times per minute in flight. Its metabolism is operating at a rate that would kill any other vertebrate within minutes, and yet it is perfectly unnervingly still. Everything about a hovering hummingbird is speed, except the body itself, which hangs in the air with an eerie suspended calm. When a hummingbird hovers in front of your face and turns its head toward you, it is making a choice. It is holding position, expending an extraordinary amount of energy to look at you, to assess you, to be present with you in a way that requires tremendous effort. When UC Davis on hummingbird visual cognition shows that their eyes process movement at 4 times the frame rate of human vision. They can see individual wing beats of other hummingbirds in what appears to our eyes as a blur. When a hummingbird looks at you while hovering, it is seeing you with a clarity and resolution that our own eyes cannot replicate. It sees you completely. And in that moment, for whatever reason, spiritual or scientific or both, you feel seen. If a hummingbird has visited you once during a significant moment and then appeared again at the same time of day, near the same spot, in a season when it had no reason to be there, pay attention. Hummingbirds are among the most location-faithful birds in North America. They return to the same territories, the same feeders, the same perches year after year. Individual birds banded by researchers have been documented returning to within feet of the same feeding locations across multiple migration cycles. Remember, if a hummingbird returns to your yard consistently, not just to a feeder, but to a specific spot near where you sit, or near a window you spend time at, or near a garden you tend, it has incorporated you into its mental map of its territory. You are to that bird a landmark, a constant. In spiritual terms, many traditions describe the return of a messenger bird not as repetition but as confirmation. The first visit says, "I am here." The return says, "I have not forgotten you." Whether you interpret that through science or by faith, the hummingbird's return is real. It is documented, and it means that you, specifically, have been chosen as part of this creature's world. I saved this one for last because it is the one that stays with people longest. Among all the hummingbird stories I've encountered, and there are thousands, there is one kind that comes up again and again, told by people who had no particular belief in signs or messengers, no expectation of anything unusual. They weren't looking for a sign, they weren't thinking about the person they'd lost. They were just outside doing something ordinary, something small, when the hummingbird came. And they knew. Not because they were looking for it, not because they wanted it to mean something, but because the moment it happened, something in them recognized before their mind had time to explain it away. A retired school teacher in Ohio told me she was deadheading her petunias, just working in the garden, not thinking of anything in particular, when a hummingbird hovered 6 inches from her face for almost 40 seconds. Her husband had died 11 months earlier. She hadn't cried in weeks. She cried then. She told me, "I didn't decide it was him. I just knew." That knowing, that recognition that arrives before thought, is something that spans cultures, languages, spiritual traditions, and lifetime itself. It did not need to. It came when she was alone. It stayed long enough to be felt. And then it was gone, back into the impossible speed of its own existence, leaving behind a stillness that she said she could still feel years later. If this has happened to you, you already know what I'm describing. And if it hasn't yet, now you'll know what it is when it does. Have you had a moment like this? A hummingbird that, when you needed it most, or when you least expected it? Tell me in the comments. I promise you, you are not alone in this, and the stories people share about these moments are among the most extraordinary things I've ever read. I'll see you in the next one.